As people continue to post quality takes on the internet, I have the absolute pleasure of reading them on Twitter.com or X or whatever. Something I've always found interesting in fighting games is how players who engage with it have always had these weird misconceptions of what these games are about. And as we as a community have grown over time with content so easily available through Twitch or YouTube or whatever platform of choice, it has influenced players for better or, well, for worse. And with this, the misconception of what neutral is and how it's been formed over the years. Neutral's been misunderstood by the majority of the player base. This belief that neutral is clean, precise, and always calculated, that one must always place their normals in the exact spot to be considered a strong player, which has never truly existed. Not to say there's never any sort of thought. Of course, we have strategies, a layer 1, a layer 2, etc., which is a deep dive for a different video, but that's not the point I'm going to play here. If you just watch any top 8 of a slow-paced fighting game like Grand Blue or Street Fighter, and play a fun little drinking game around with normals, you will knock yourself out. And even in faster paced fighting games like Dragon Ball FighterZ or Gear, players often flail around looking for straight hits or an opportunity to run their offense as they promote proactive gameplay. Neutral can and often is messy, filled with potential errors, aggressive movement, and players enforcing their will with quote-unquote neutral skips, not to simply wobble back and forth like a Geef player in Street Fighter 4. And with the recent discussion, history has clearly been forgotten or at least rewritten. The idea that modern fighters are filled with neutral skips, and back in the olden days we fought with tooth and nail with our crouching medium kick in order to get a crumb of damage. Neutral skips have always existed in fighting games and will continue to exist, especially within the certain archetype. While they may vary in strength, their value is to present an ever-present threat and add on to the mental stack. But at its core, I want to talk about two different things in this video: why not all strong neutral options are necessarily neutral skips, and how neutral skips have changed over the year. So first off, let's define what neutral skip is. Now, there's a definition on Infel's fighting game glossary for what neutral skip is, and a simple snippet of the definition really is the ability for a character to go from a long range to extremely close very quickly. A small caveat, if that's the correct word, I would like to place here is the pretty fast part. For example, in Street Fighter 6, I would define Ken's Heavy Dragon Lash to be a neutral skip option as it passes by law of this definition, which is just going from far away to up close within a matter of time. For Ken players, Dragon Lash is a 28 frame move that they can use as a neutral skip when they don't want to really use their normals for whatever particular reason. But 28 frames in the context of fighting games isn't particularly that fast. That's like a charged dust in Guilty Gear. And while I'm not saying I'm capable of always stopping a Dragon Lash the moment I see it and properly responding to it, I wouldn't call it fast. It's, well, relative, depending on what we're talking about. Neutral skips are strong neutral options, but not all strong neutral options are neutral skips. A good example of this in Street Fighter 6 would be Marisa's Superman Punch. This option can be important to represent for Marisa as it crushes lows, can beat projectiles, and most importantly, leaves her plus. However, it doesn't allow for opponent strike throw offense after being blocked, usually because it's spaced out in a particular way that doesn't allow you to do so, only allowing a minor continued amount of pressure through maybe a button of some sort to get a little bit more chip on that drive gauge. And while I'm not trying to downplay this move by any means, when compared to other neutral skip options like Dragon Lash or potentially, if you want to say, Candy Spin Knuckle, a clear difference can be seen here. These differences and parallels are important to understand as we continue to have these important conversations regarding the definitions and applicable nature of these moves in fighting games. This obviously isn't only found in Street Fighter, but any fighting game, new or old. Another parallel I want to add on to this whole idea around strong neutral skips or these strong neutral options is how neutral skips, by definition, they are slow enough for you to be able to stop or predictable enough for you to be able to stop in comparison to the basic strong neutral options. If I'm playing Luke in Street Fighter 6 and I'm doing crouching medium punch and buffering drive rush, while you could potentially whiff punch or crouching medium punch, the recovery frames are so low that it's very difficult to do so. You're more or less predicting they're going to press the button again in order for you to whiff punish it. Unlike a Dragon Lash or a Spin Knuckle where you can see it and you can respond to it accordingly. Neutral skips are usually much easier to respond to than actual strong neutral options. However, it's not as black and white as I just defined. And to stay in the lens of Street Fighter 6, you have stuff like Lily's Condor Spire when she has wind, incredibly fast, the EX version impossible to react to at certain ranges, and you just have to deal with the pressure afterwards. And outside of Street Fighter 6, you have very fast dash speeds, let's say Makoto dashes, or focus attack as a system mechanic, things that are harder to respond to at the time, especially when you're not expecting it. Now, the idea of neutral skips has changed over the years. A core difference between some modern fighting games and older fighting games is where you can find them. Now, in modern fighting games, it's much easier to find them within the system mechanics itself. Drive Rush as an example, Wild Wall Assault, which is applicable to certain specific characters, Super Dash, I would say, and some would argue 6XL in Grand Blue, which I would argue that's more of a strong neutral option than a neutral skip, but that's a different conversation entirely. However, to me, when talking about it being found in system mechanics rather than mainly in characters, this levels out the playing field. Strong neutral skips or simply strong options found within neutral in older titles were typically just found within the character itself. Urien pressing charge into Aegis and telling you hold that wasn't exactly thrilling gameplay to me, but if you ask a Urien player, they probably love that shit. And this can be found with so many different characters within that game alone of Alpha 3, and these characters were strong, powerful, and obnoxious. And while fighting games have gotten a bit more tame as time has progressed, ideas and concepts of how these neutral options are conveyed and involved has changed as well. Instead of solely seeing them within characters, developers have adapted to players and placed the strong and aggressive options inside the mechanics instead. This gives characters more of a fighting chance when they are universal mechanics or mechanics specifically given to archetypes that struggle in neutral, like White Wild Assault. It might be frustrating for some players as it often feels like you're facing the same strong mechanics over and over again regardless of the matchup, making the game feel a little sameish. However, one core thing still exists, which is individual character strengths. When individual characters are the sole options for these types of skips, players in large will naturally gravitate to what is strong, leading them to the path of least resistance. It's easy, it's powerful, and will get you wins that sometimes feel, well, undeserved, while reducing their potential for each character, or by reducing the amount of characters that have these types of skips and baking them into the system mechanics. It evened the playing field just a bit. The catch-22 to this, of course, is how some individual characters benefit more than others. So for example, Geef's Drive Rush is complete trash, but Jerry's and DJ's Drive Rush thrive. At its core, the concept of neutral skips have always existed in fighting games, but it doesn't completely control the game like some players state. While it's frustrating, if a player is over-relying on these options, it can, at times, be easy to bait out and beat accordingly. And while you'll see it more often in modern fighting games, it doesn't take away from the individual player's skill and ability to play neutral well. But those are just my random thoughts. What do you guys think? Like, comment, subscribe, you know the YouTube stuff, and I'll see you next time. Also, check out my Twitch. I stream occasionally, I guess. It's been Bill here. Peace.